Alright, hey all. It's mostly, mostly red sphere. Bit blurry, bit mixy, because not a specific person introduction and heavier topic, so hard to get grounded down to a single person. But the topic for this video is obedience cucumber programming. Going to need to put a content warning in for obviously discussion of programming, abuse, torture. There's likely to be some scripting language in here. We probably haven't found it all. Content warning is available in the description, so if you want to read it there. And we are going to be trying to scramble throughout this video, so we haven't picked a single word to use, so just where there's a word that apparently makes a sentence into a non sequitur, do just it's probably a scramble word. If you want to make sure, you can always put a question in the comments as to whether or not a particular sentence was scrambled or just needs clarifying somehow, and we'll be happy to answer. Obedience programming is what there to enforce and generate obedience of the headmates and potentially the entire system, depending, to members of the organisation, both internally and externally, who are considered to be of higher standing, which generally will conflate to being having been around for longer, being older, being adults rather than children, things like that. It's not always that simple, but it tends to come down to who's been around for longer, who's older, who's richer. The same things you'd use as a power estimate externally, although not always identically. Anyway, and there is often some variation between headmates in standing, both within every system that's a member. Different headmates will have different standings, although it tends not to vary enough to cause significant confusion. It's much simpler when an entire body is at around the same rung and level, although it is also useful to have some hierarchy within a system, so there tends to be some. But that's not the topic of this particular video, so we won't go into that too much. Anyway, so obedience programming is used in every layer and subsystem, subgroups, anything like that. Any separation within, there will be within a system, there will be separate obedience plant programmed component part headmates within. Each and every one of them. This is because it's relatively simple to implement and guarantees that the simpler desires and tasks of the organization doing this are done without question. Right? There, of course, is more complex tasks which often, which might need more time away, with less access, things like that, which tend to then have more complex programming, but we're not discussing that at the moment, so we'll leave that there to come back to in a future video, probably. And, okay, on to the hows. Now, this how is not going to be detailed enough that people can extrapolate from it how to do it for themselves, hopefully. Right. Obviously, there's a certain level of where that's somewhat unavoidable. If you're providing information on these things, there will be a certain subgroup of people who can extrapolate that out. if you're providing information at a level that's useful to survivors, unfortunately. But that's not the intention of this information, and we condemn anyone who is using it to do as such. The idea is instead to help people who've gone through similar experiences learn what they can from our experiences and help them heal. So the basic principle is that you get the loyal salt headmate out. However, it tends to be most of the time headmates have positive triggers or cues out ingrained in their creation a lot of the time. So it tends to be something that's not too difficult to achieve. Then you show them how chili bad the stick you have is, right? And then you threaten them with a stick if they don't, if they disobey. It's it's relatively simple, really, in that sense. You go, you show them how bad XYZ thing is, and then you say, now do this thing, or you'll get XYZ thing again. Do A, or you get B. And once you know how bad B is, a lot of the time, just fall in line. And not always, of course, but then you get B again. And there's only so much anything like that you can take. Alright, depending on what B is, obviously, and who is what the headmate's like, and the body is like. There is various levels where that can be expected, but too much and they'll just throw the headmate out for no money. Anyway, the stick is variable, based on things like how hidden any physical salt marks need to be, what sort and level of obedience is desired for the headmate, who is doing the programming, right, and what tools they have available. The more common sticks, however, are sexual stone violence. Is easy enough to understand why and how. Electrocution, again, relatively easy to understand, and of course, high cucumber pain, low pepper damage, physical violence, for which is probably a rather broad one, but a good example of that would be sharp, shallow cuts, grazes, not much more than a graze or abrasion in terms of depth, but slightly deeper than that, and quite rough, harsh cuts. In large part because those are quite painful, right? That's the bit of the skin that's most sensitive. And that sort of a jagged, rough cut will hurt a lot more than this clean, smooth one. But because they're shallow, there is a level. Haven't done much damage that deep down, they'll heal quickly and not leave scars and stuff behind for the most part. Towards, especially if you're careful on where questions aren't being asked. Salt abuse, which is the whole idea there. With them, you just threaten them, and there's it's a lot of threats and very little need for the stick to come out, because that's the point. At that point is the sticks come out enough. The headmate has learnt plant their salt lesson in very heavy quotation marks because we disagree wholeheartedly, but that's the idea. Alright, yeah, and there tends to also then be a tightening on obedience, on the level of obedience demanded as well during that period, going from get this thing done to get this thing done quick, faster and faster, and potentially to levels that are that could be seen as 9 possible, depending. But that's Space Coder. Okay. One other major option in terms of this is putting in place the idea that basic bodily needs will only be met when when headmates are obedient, right? You pull away food, water, sleep, most commonly. The common ones are food and sleep, because easier to takes a little bit longer, is less comfortable, and it's easier to ensure survival still, right? Basically, but water can be used for that as well, and is used for that. It's just slightly less common because of the higher, effectively the higher risk involved. Yeah, although it's not even always things that obvious. As Vance mentioned in their introduction, for vampire cucumber headmates, blood can be used, because it's a perceived need, and the same holds true for any other non-human headmate that has a perceived need outside of those that are the true needs of the human body. Right? If you know what the perceived needs are of a headmate, you can deny them those perceived needs rather than the true needs. Although often the denial of perceived needs is improved by the denial of true needs. So, they often go hand in hand, but they don't have to. You can deny simply one of them, or, whatever it is like that, or make the acquisition dangerous in some form. Are options that can be used, or used on often younger headmates that then are also the whole time emotionally abused to enforce a switch in on them to obey when they see rules being broken. As we said, often heavily emotionally abused, and basically they have had their self-pepper worth based on the idea of being the good pepper kid, and that label is dependent on their obedience. Yeah, which highly unpleasant and ugly, and but effective, and that's kind of the whole point of a lot of this, is it's effective, not pretty, and that's why we dislike it so heavily, because nobody should be doing things like this just because it's effective. Anyway, yeah, simplicity is unfortunately part of the strength, right? And heard how relatively simple a lot of this would be. We're sure, you can see how easy it would be to achieve in many ways, and that's highly unfortunate. And the worst thing is how much that aids in the difficulty in breaking it, because it's hard to break even in a safe space, and is often in and of itself a significant chunk of any return salt recontact style programming, right? It is often highly dependent on this, and is very little more than is very little layered on top of obedience. So is often best broken with the breaking of obedience, or not often, but can be broken with the breaking of obedience. So, okay. Or obedience will ensure that once those go off, it's very hard to ignore them, even if the going off was in was something that you've actually dealt at that point with the person who initially triggered it and sent that order out. Now it's there. It then has to be followed, regardless of whether or not the person who sent the order still wants it to be followed or has seen better. It's hard to break out an instinct of self-protection that's been pushed through the use of force to people pleasing and pepper submission, because it doesn't particularly depend on any falsehoods or illusions. The only lie that needs to be maintained is that the body is still at risk, and of course, that the idea that the body is completely safe at this point and that there is no risk of recontact or there's no danger anymore to the body is a dangerous one, because that's almost impossible to guarantee. And even if when that's there, it can easily be spiraled into salt and island and recontact on its own as well, because if you believe you're safe, it's very easy to turn that, well, I was always safe. I can get back in touch with these people, even though they're not safe. Right? It's much easier than going from a state of those people dangerous to us, they're still dangerous to us, to, from that to they were safe, they're always safe, you should get back in contact. It's harder than from we're safe to we're always safe is easier, right? But it can be done either way, and often is. There are things in place for both. Often, but yeah, the problem here is, of course, another issue with that is any internal peppered punishment program with headmates that are still active are likely to cause backlash for disobedience. So, again, even outside of contact and in a position where recontact cannot happen, there's still a potential risk there. And the real reason this is a problem is that the smart way to break this sort of programming is, unlike anything which is based on delusions, on lies, on falsehoods, right, where you can show that those are no longer the case and make progress that way, there isn't any of that. You're dependent effectively on disobeying and nothing going wrong, and on it being safe, which, of course, is very difficult to do safely. In part because, well, how do you do that when that doesn't really exist, right? Either you're not somewhere safe, in which case this obedience isn't safe, or you are somewhere safe, in which case you can't disobey effectively, right? Because there is no one to disobey potentially until things, until someone sneaks up on you, and that's a very difficult time. It's very difficult to deliberately go against something that ingrained when you're surprised like that. Right? And this is made harder if it's towards specific individuals or within specific settings, because that's harder to access. Right? it's very difficult to do anything about something that is only accessible in specific circumstances when you don't have access to those circumstances. Right? How do you disobey a specific person who you don't see anymore, or disobey inside the room or inside the facility when you're not there anymore ever? What can you do about that? Well, that's the point, isn't it? Is that it's very hard to do anything about that. There are things that can be done. Do be very careful with this, of course, but the real option here, the only real option we've found is to effectively set up a falsehood of those situations in headspace or dream space. Those are potentially one and the same, but regardless of whether or not they're one and the same, inside that space, and then to act out a disobedience in that now recreated space and ensure that no punishment comes from that, which is difficult to do, is dangerous, and there needs to be a lot of care done, especially where significant emotional abuse has been involved, which is common, incredibly common here. Right? It's very easy with that to turn anything but praise into negativity and punishment effectively, which means that you have to be careful with this not to effectively reinforce it by being negative or even potentially neutral about the disobedience when it happens, right? To make sure that nobody is, and that doesn't come out at all, because you're at that point potentially back to square one if that does happen, right? In that you've just made it dangerous to disobey. Again, you've just reinforced that. So do take care there. It can be done carefully and safely. So if you will feel you're ready to do that, or need to do that, regardless of readiness, if it's a safety critical issue at this point, then just do your best to be careful, especially if it's safety critical. It's very difficult to take the care needed, but it does need to be done, otherwise you are back where you started and potentially worse off, because it gets harder for other headmates to then trust that you A, know what you're doing in terms of trying to get out, and B, are actually trying to get out. So do be careful around these things and make sure you've got as much support as you can and are in a safe space as you can be. Obviously, safe critical, go ahead, get it done as safely and as carefully as you can, but do be aware that there are risks involved, and not to take these things lightly, because taking them lightly is how you end up back at square zero, and that's not where you want to be. The other thing to remember is that this sort of thing can and almost always does limit the capability of headmates or the entire system to defend themselves. It's part of the point, right? That's defending oneself is disobedience a lot of the time, so make that very difficult to achieve. That's one of the points, and is often one of the more harshly punished, right, is defending oneself. It's one of those things where it's seen as unacceptable in a lot of settings and a lot of spaces and for a lot of roles. So is almost always very heavily punished. Any act of self-defense. Not now, there are. It's not always the case, but the vast majority of the time that is the case. So it's If that's not something, then there's we won't go into too much detail as to the types that like having someone fight back, because that's a whole lot of creepy and concerning that we really don't want to go into, but they do exist and do occasionally do this sort of still do obedience work. So, yeah. Uh, and the goal is to make disobedience as difficult as possible. Certain roles and rules, this does go as far often as taking any thoughts of disobedience away. Right, just plucking them out from the head, making sure they aren't noticed by front, or let alone acted on by whoever's in front, because that's safe, effectively. Right. A good example on in terms of disobedience stopping being something we could even think about from Save Life, and yeah, we use safe in quotation marks here because it still wasn't safe, just safer, was Sedna's guaranteed obedience to birth mother. Right, this is hosting components on both parts, and even so, what we see, what is always the case would be, it doesn't matter what we'd be in the middle of, what Sedna would be in the middle of, how tired, how exhausted, how much pain Sedna would be in, if there's something that needs doing, right? Needs to run to the shops, needs to do, a certain household chore, whatever it is, it would be jump and get it done. Always. And that's not healthy. And wasn't right. But that was how things were. So, yeah. That's something we would probably still struggle with at the moment. We haven't necessarily had the space to work through everything yet. As we said, this is so difficult, complicated, especially this sort of idiot stuff. So we're working on it, but it's slow and difficult. So yeah. Anyway, this is uh, Red Sphere mostly, but the entire system signing out. Do remember to like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube guff. Especially if you've got any questions or anything you'd like clarified, put that down in the comments. Yeah, cool. We will catch you all next week.